Welcome to the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, where we discuss an independent approach to the art of cinema and explore the subtext of various featured films. My name is Peter O'Brien, and I am an independent filmmaker, author, and musician.
My name is Bendler. I'm a film and stage actor and a pop culture enthusiast.
I'm Anne Milleville, a French screenwriter and producer.
Today's VHS selection is The Long Good Friday from 1980, directed by John Mackenzie. And if you have not seen this film, I strongly encourage you to go check out the VHS episode on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any other selections, and then check out the film and come on back to the podcast because we will be discussing it openly. There will be spoilers. You've been warned. That being said, I really enjoy this film. I think it's a very different kind of gangster film. It has a very unique flair and a very unique twist. But I'm curious what Steve and Anne have to say about this. I know Steve, he's really into the gangster films, specifically the New York gangster films, and that's just kind of, I guess, a regional preference. However, I know you do have a fondness for Snatch, as does Anne, because of her infatuation with Brad Pitt.
I do also love Brad Pitt, so I can't knock her on that one.
I think we all love Brad Pitt, and I think we all love him, especially in Snatch. And not just because of the physique, but I think also just because of the character.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting point to jump off on from that, because I know that this film has had a tremendous influence on Guy Ritchie, who is the writer and director of Snatch. And when you know that, and you watch this movie, The Long Good Friday, and you watch other Guy Ritchie movies, you can really see that influence come to the surface, very specifically in The Gentleman. I don't know if you guys happen to see The Gentleman, his most recent one, but the final scene in The Gentleman is lifted right out of the end of this movie.
Well, to talk about Snatch again for a second, my favorite, even though I love Brad Pitt, my favorite character in that movie is Bricktop. That guy's fucking awesome. And then here he is.
Yeah, here he is. His little cameo in The Long Good Friday. Bricktop, shout out. Alan Ford. I think he just had a birthday. He's like 86.
Damn.
Good for him. But yeah. So that's another thing that I'm saying. Like with this film, there's a lot of influence that goes beyond Guy Ritchie, but I feel like even within the gangster genre, this film kind of elevates things and takes it in a slightly different direction, because it's not about turf war necessarily. It's not about, mafia family dynamics. Mm-hmm. It's not about a heist. There's a very unique and I feel like sort of special twist on this film that taps into that realm in a very unique and interesting way.
I gotta say, I agree with that. I've seen my fair share of gangster films over the years, and I think it was a very unique entry point to this story of how Harold's going about his day to day, and then all of a sudden his world starts blowing up.
Literally.
Yeah, in certain cases, and he's like, "What the fuck is this all about?" Like, what did I, who is this? What did I do? And you're trying to figure out what's going on. And so I thought that's a very, very unique entry point into the story. I don't think I've ever seen that in another gangster film. It's like almost like you said in the video, like a gangster with mystery.
Yeah, for me, it's more a real British movie than a gangster movie. I really liked it. You have great acting performances in it. The chemistry between Harold and Victoria, it's really great. And you have an unforgettable score. I love the music in it. So it was quite funny to watch. I laughed a lot. I don't know if it's European humor or not, but you have lots of irony in it and funny lines. It's a gripping story. And as you said in the VHS video, it's very realistic. So yeah, I really enjoyed watching this movie. And it's really surprising that this movie is not more known.
It's not just the gangster film, but it's infused with these very real political threats. I don't want to dance around it too much, but basically the IRA has been rubbed the wrong way by Harold's organization, and he is unaware of it, so they are out to get him, and he has to figure out what's going on. And the IRA is a very serious bunch of customers that you do not want to be on the wrong side of. And I know there's a lot of conflict going on in that part of the world for a long long period of time. But as a European, Anne, I was curious about your perspective on that element of the story.
Yeah, first of all, I guess maybe it's the same for American movies, but I think it's something we really do in Europe. We love to have political messages in movies. You don't expect to talk about politics. We always do that. But regarding the conflict between the Irish terrorism and the UK, of course we heard of it here. Since I'm a kid, we talked about it when I was a kid, a teenager.
I just found it very, very interesting and engaging that they took it to a political setting, between Ireland and the UK. It becomes global in a way because people have roots and people have ancestry and people maybe still have family connections. So it can broaden the scope and appeal. I think, especially for American audiences who are raised on gangster TV shows and gangster movies.
So you felt close to Pierce Brosnan, Pete, because of your Irish origins?
Well, no, it was fantastic to see just the cast that came together in this particular film. And yeah, like I remember the first time I watched it, and the first character you see is Colin, right? And it's Belloc and Paul Freeman. And I was like, wow, it's Belloc. Awesome. And of course, he's short-lived, but it was still exciting to see him. And then all the other faces that turned up, and specifically, of course, Pierce Brosnan was fantastic. And I love how he bookends the movie.
Yeah.
When it gets to that point at the end and he's, the car speeds away and like wears razors. And then, he looks out the window and he sees Victoria. And if you look carefully, you can see razors in the passenger seat with a bullet hole in his head. He's gone. But Harold realizes his situation, and then Pierce just kind of like comes up with the silenced, handgun, very James Bond, right from the gate. It was just great. And the fact that his character didn't have any dialogue, it's one of those things we had talked about a lot in this podcast series is, saying something without speaking or without saying anything, like how much silence can say on the screen.
I agree. Yeah, Belloc was very short-lived in this. He went around the corner there looking for the old Remington steel, and then he got shanked in the gut. Ends up in the drink. But yeah, I mean, it was fun to see him. It was fun to see him do something outside of Indiana Jones, which is very cool. Pierce Brosnan, it's like a little baby. He's so young, so cool to see. But I think you nailed it in the video when you said the outstanding performances of Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren. Wow, I mean. She, for me, was I mean, they both are neck and neck, but she was so good in this. I mean, she's strong when she had to be, vulnerable when she had to be, and different types of vulnerability, which I really appreciated. When Bob Hoskins is given to the business in the apartment about telling the Americans, what's really going on. And she gets scared and she's afraid for her life and whatever. But then there's that vulnerability when she's in the elevator with Jeff, when Jeff is, kind of, revealing his hand and how he feels about her. And there's a bit of longing in her eyes, which I thought was really, really cool. But then I think, cooler heads prevail and she realizes how they'll both end up if anything comes of that. So, but such a nuanced performance with just the eyes there for Helen Mirren. And she's always a joy to watch and such a beautiful woman and such a great craftsman. So yeah, really cool to see, her and Bob play off each other. One of my favorite parts is when he, after him and Jeff have the incident on the boat, and he comes out a bloody mess, and he's like looking for a gun. He's gonna go fucking crazy, and she just gets in there, slaps him, and then like looks him in the eyes, like calm down. And then like when he puts his head on her shoulder in the car, loved it.
Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren. I don't think enough can be said about their chemistry in this film. The way they're set up, he's definitely like a very like street guy, and she is a very sophisticated, educated woman that just kind of their paths crossed, and whatever it was in their personal chemistry as characters that brought them together, and they just work together so well. And as actors giving a performance, it was very exciting to see. I was aware of the film for a long time, and I knew Bob Hoskins was in it, but when I started watching it and Helen Mirren showed up. I know her from her later career. So to see her at this point in her career was eye-opening from a historical point of view for me.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, wow, she always had it.
I attribute that, what you're talking about, to the difference in discipline. A friend of mine had his son graduate, just years ago from high school and say, okay, well, he wants to go study acting. He's got two choices. He could either go to California or he can go to the Royal Institute. I said, go to the fucking Royal Institute is not even a question. Because I feel like in America, we're trying to train movie stars, and over there, they're making actors. And the craft is so serious over there. I mean, you get your Daniel Day-Lewis, you get your Gary Oldmans, you get your Helen Mirrens. So like these people from very early on know what's going on.
There is another character that I loved. It's Razors. He doesn't talk much, but it's the same. I think with his face, you understand a lot, especially at the beginning when he's watching Harris and Jeff from his car. I think you understand something's wrong is happening just with his eyes. So, and he has the look, he has everything to be the perfect gangster. So I don't know if the actor is famous. I took his name is P.H. Moriarty.
Yeah, he's a famous British character actor. I know, speaking of Guy Ritchie, he was in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, along with Dexter Fletcher, who was the little thug kid that was watching the car. That's Dexter Fletcher, who grew up to become a famous actor as well as director. He kind of finished directing Bohemian Rhapsody when Bryan Singer dropped the ball, and then he went on to direct Rocket Man, and he's just... This is like, again, his first thing as a little kid. I think he's like less than 10.
But the only thing I didn't like in the acting, I don't know if you would agree on that, it's Jeff's death. I think I wasn't really convinced when he has his, I don't know if you say that, the jugular exploding. And he has like spasms,
You weren't convinced when his jugular erupted from a broken bottle shot?
It's too much.
Oh my goodness!
No, but I don't know the scene
that
when
to me was actually like one of the more heartbreaking scenes.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was an incredibly heartbreaking scene. Yeah, because they were best friends. That was his right hand man. That was
of course I understand the emotion
he betrayed
behind
him,
it.
and then he
Yeah,
give him the business like that and to go out that way, it's like, yeah, that was heartbreaking, man. I think you're diabolic.
Had shades of Fredo on it, but he questioned his authority, he questioned his power and his reach and his ability, and then Jeff set up that whole thing behind his back, and I think it was just too many mistakes that he couldn't let slide. What I found to be a fascinating point is that the character of Colin is openly gay in the movie. And now I know in the New York gangster world, that's a big no. Even, like currently, that's like, to say it's frowned upon is putting it mildly. But here, I mean, talk about, this is 1980, this film came out. That's another difference in culture.
From my experience, when it comes to sex and violence, Europeans tend to not care so much about sexual content as they do about violence, as where Americans are the opposite, where we don't care so much about violence, but sexual content can be a little bit taboo depending upon your company. And I've always kind of found that a little bit fascinating. And I think that's an excellent point that you brought up, with regard to the timeline and the timetable and the cultural interpretation of that. Did you notice who he was picking up in the bar in the beginning?
No.
Yeah.
That's Mr. Gibbs from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
With the mutton chops.
Yeah. I didn't recognize him. Wow, that's cool.
That's what I'm saying. This movie's amazing. It has like this like insane cast of like British character actors.
No, I really like this movie a lot. I had never heard of it before. So I'm thankful for the recommendation. I liked the pace of the movie. I feel like it has some really cool shots. Like you had one of them you had showed in the video, the meat locker, but just the POV of being hung up by your feet, I thought was pretty cool. Bob Hoskins' overall demeanor, the entire movie, that was really cool, really measured. It felt like he had a sense of control until he didn't. I think people take for granted when you're playing a character of power, how much power do you assert and who's on the receiving end of that power. So like when he's giving it to the guys who think might be betraying him in the meat locker, it's a very measured, very like, okay, this is what's going to happen here. And then it gives it to Helen Mirren. It's a different level. Like it's like a very personal betrayal he felt. And then he realizes the consequences of his actions, of how he made her feel. And then the stuff with Jeff was just, it was like a crime of passion. So very good performance. Especially from an acting point of view, it's a treat to watch something like that.
And once again, maybe it's due to the acting performance, but you have a bad guy on screen that you feel for, especially at the end. But even during all the movie, you have sympathy for him. That's a bit what we said for A Clockwork Orange. But for Clockwork Orange, the main character is really, really something. But for this one, once again, I felt so bad for him at the end. I felt, okay, this guy is a self-made man, and the only one he really cares the most is his wife, and they took her from him, and he knows what's gonna happen at the end, and that's the power of this scene. Just in his eyes, you understand his frustration, his anger, but also that he knows what's gonna happen, and that he wants to keep a poker face in a way. His ego is speaking, So I love the latest scene. It's the masterpiece. For all the movie, when you watch it, it's like a funny moment, and just for this last scene, you're like, wow, such a performance,
And last scene's fantastic. And I think that for me, at the moment he left her in the car, I'm like, oh, fuck, that's a big mistake. I've seen too many of these to know how this is going to play out. He left very, very confident. And like you said, the IRA, that you don't mess with those guys. They have numbers and they run deep. And you think you got some of them, but you didn't get all of them. So he was it's a bold move, but what I loved about Bob Hoskins, and like you said, in those final moments there, is that he accepts his fate. But I think what you also see, for me at least, is him running through scenarios, and he's just like burning through them, and just the want to do something is so great, and him running those scenarios through his eyes of like, how do I think of every possibility of how could I possibly get out of this, or what's going to possibly happen to me, and when you see the thought process, phenomenal that you can convey that without saying anything, and the audience knows what's going on. It's top-notch stuff.
And that they hold on him in the close-up for that entire duration. You just get to see the calculation like through his eyes, and then like even just the changes in his jaw, and the way he clenches it, he's like, it's masterful.
Yeah.
It really, really is, because it's so simple and it's so effective, and it resonates with the audience. Like when you finish the movie and you leave on that note, you're like, it stays with you. Like you're still in the back of that car with Bob Hoskins right now.
Yeah.
And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Visually Hidden Selects. If you're looking for a spoiler-free recommendation of a classic film with professional analysis and insight, check out Visually Hidden Selects, exclusively on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel.
I will say, to your point in the video also about the locations, loved it top to bottom. And I'll tell you, for my money, I'm always of the opinion that a gangster movie should look gritty. I think it helps with the authenticity and the feeling like you're a part of that sub-world.
I wanted to know if you had the same feeling as I had when I was watching it. There are scenes you're like, okay, what's the point of that scene? But actually you understand at the end the point, because, for example, you see Harold's mother at the church 2 times. I think you have two shots in the church. Even the French chef. Why do they have a French chef? Why do they have a scene talking in French? You don't get the point. But I think it's to confuse you in a way, to develop the characters. Also, you understand with their interactions, their personality and their profile. But to have a scene with Victoria speaking French to him, and then she talks to Jeff about the plates or whatever, I think it's quite long. But even the church scenes, it's too long.
I think it's to just show Victoria's character and to show her sophistication and to show like what she's bringing to this. The whole thing with Harold's character is he's trying to transition out of this underworld persona, and he's trying to legitimize his business. And Victoria is really kind of the one masterminding that for him. He's the face and he's, the one going forward, but she's really the mastermind behind all of it. And it's her sophistication and it's her refinement and her attention to those details that is going to make the impression that Harold wishes to have on these people, whether it's the Americans or the other people on the boat. He wants to come across as this legitimate businessman, and Victoria is the one who has that skill set. Harold will round you up and take you to the abattoir at midnight. No problem. Yeah. But Victoria, she's the one who's going to impress and dress to impress.
I think that's it's the old classic Beauty and the Beast, right? Harold's the beast, and when the beast comes out, when he gets off the boat, she's gotta take it down a notch. Let's refocus. Let's stick to the plan. And I think that's what that is. That's the dynamic. She's like bringing him up station wise in life. I love that juxtaposition of that. Like, here he is in the meat locker doing what he does, the interrogations, and then goes up to this beautiful penthouse apartment where she's sitting waiting for him. And anytime you see the sophistication, it's the French chef, or it's on the boat, how nice and clean and neat the boat is, and the apartment, and then everything else is in the streets and back alleys and over by the docks and whatnot. So I kind of thought that was pretty cool.
With regard to the church scenes, I feel like that is also just helping establish not only the setting and the time period, it's giving it a very specific calendar moment, and making sense of okay, yeah, this is all this is the long Good Friday, but it is also kind of showing the lengths to which people are willing to go. It's it doesn't matter if it's a church. And Bob Hoskins, he has that other great line: "You can't go crucifying people outside a church, not on Good Friday." Yeah, you can, because you cross the wrong people and they don't care about those kinds of things. They have their own agenda and you got in the way of that. So now you got to pay. So I think it's to kind of play with that cultural taboo. So I think that's a part of it as well, is to establish the setting, establish the time frame, and then also establish the type of characters that he's up against.
I love the humor in that line. You can't go doing that on Good Friday. Even I have my limits, man. It's just so good and so funny. But yeah, I really enjoy the humor. I enjoy British humor, period. So, but to see it, in this context, I really enjoyed it. And Bob Hoskins delivered in spades. So, bravo to him. He's so good.
I read that he received a letter of congratulations from a real gangster after his performance. That's crazy.
Yeah, Bob Hoskins, I mean, you talk about an underrated actor, and this was his breakout movie. This was his first leading role, and he crushes it. He did another movie called Mona Lisa in the mid 80s, where it's also a gangster movie, but he's a totally different kind of character. And then from that, of course, he broke into American films and, Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That's funny, because after the movie ended, I watched it on Max, and then Mona Lisa came up as a suggestion. So also, I think the script was just enough. It gave you just what you needed. And I think it really let the actors do their thing. Sometimes with these movies, they try to overcomplicate it and get all this dialogue in. You don't need all that shit. If you've got good, solid characters performed by really good actors, and you got a solid, focused story, you're going to get something like this. You're going to get a product like this where it just goes on its own.
I think Anne had mentioned this in a previous conversation as well, but European cinema, it's more focused on telling the story visually, and you don't get bogged down with superfluous dialogue or filler. And this is a fantastic example of it. And I think it just comes across very, very clearly. One of the reasons I selected this movie, in addition to my fondness for it, was because I want to share it with more people. I think more people should see this movie because, one, it is very influential. Once you see it, a lot of other pieces in contemporary cinema are going to fall into place for you. But it's a fantastically underrated film, in my opinion.
I love the last scene, but Colin's death, I couldn't stop laughing during this scene, which is, I think it's supposed to be a bit sad also, but there is a line, I don't remember all of it, but when he says, "Oh, he was the kindest man on earth," and you have the razors saying, "Oh, but why did he get killed then?" And he said, "Hey, respect the dead, okay?" I think it was so funny
Mhm.
saying it again. So yeah, definitely it's my favorite scene.
I love the abattoir scene when he just brings them all in on the cattle rail and he's just interrogating them. You know, again, it's such a unique approach. It has a great visual element. I mean, it's on the poster. It's just a really good kind of moment in the story because now he's rounded up everybody. He wants answers and he's not getting answers. And it's right after that that Parky comes and tells him, like, you're dealing with the IRA and you need to back the fuck off. And he's like, well, no, fuck that and fuck them for thinking that. And why the fuck are they coming after me? No. And he slaps the police officer. He just gives him like a pimp slap.
Give him a bitch slap.
Yeah.
And then that was topped when he slaps the widow at the grave. He gave her the whole hand, man. I mean, Jesus. he didn't hold back on that one.
It's a very well developed and dynamic character. Like when you think of a gangster movie, you usually think of like a one or two dimensional character, generally speaking. You know, it's very playing up, you know, in some cases stereotypes or things like that. But in this case, Bob Hoskins, he has like so much going on and he has different ways that he interacts with different people, and it all kind of comes across in this story. You know, he's very different with Victoria than he is with Parky, and he's very different with Jeff than he is with Victoria or Parky, and you know, with razors. And then when he's going and collecting the information from the various people, you know, he interacts with all of them very differently. And then he's very, very different with the Americans. So he has all of these different faces that he's wearing, all of these different balls that he's juggling, and it's a consistent character.
Yeah, I think for me, I have a couple of favorite scenes. The ending is great, and this is no particular order, but the scene with Jeff and Victoria in the elevator, that was very, very, very good. She's killing it, given, you know, all that with a couple looks and you know, like one or two lines. So I was on board with that. Loved what she gave there. I think I got to go back to that boat scene. The way he navigates through the different emotions of, all right, I have to call this guy here because we got to sort some shit out, right? Okay. Gets on the boat. And then there's moments where he's like, at first it's a bit standoffish and like, hey, it's the feeling each other out of what's going to happen here. So you want to go on deck? Yeah, I don't feel comfortable in these clothes. And it's all that unspoken, like, who's going to draw first type of a deal. And then Bob Hoskins slips into that, but we're friends, and like genuinely has a laugh with him and he's enjoying himself, and like, and that puts him at ease. And then he starts sitting behind the desk, and now let's get to some questions. And like, but the nuance in that and the psychology in that to get that guy to think, oh, I'm okay. So much so that he's nonchalantly says, well, I did X, Y, and Z. And like, what? And then it gets crazier. Then he brings it down again, and then it's contemplative. And like, so just within that context, the amount of emotions that Hoskins runs through there is phenomenal. And then just the outright rage when he's outside the boat, like he's dragging Helen Mirren down the goddamn dock, like how my son hangs on my foot. He's unhinged.
The whole movie is like watching like a lit fuse just burn down. Yeah, it's brilliant. And of course it has, you know, the gratuitous shower scene. What film is not complete without a gratuitous shower scene? Only we've got, you know, Bob Hoskins washing away the pain.
Right. But I love that. I love that scene. I mean, obviously I prefer if it was Helen Mirren in the shower, but I love that Bob Hoskins is in there and he's just dealing with it all. And then she's out there burning the clothes with razors, you know, like we got to get this, like, stand by your man at all costs. I mean, she comes in clutch for this guy, you know, every at bat, she's hitting a home run. And like, we're burning this, but yeah, it was the cleansing of everything that's going on with him and Jeff. It's the getting rid of the evidence, you know, cleansing that stuff. So it was like a really nice, well put together scene.
Yeah, that whole sequence really, you know, jumping back, you had mentioned the scene in the elevator between Jeff and Victoria, and really that's the culmination of that sequence when he shows up at the dinner and he like diffuses the stuff with the lawyer. and then they're in the car, and you can kind of
Mhm.
tell like there's a little bit of tension, like the way it's built up, and then it culminates in the elevator with his exchange and her demeanor. It's like,
It's very Mia Wallace, Vincent Vega, the car ride, that whole
yeah,
thing, you know. Um, I dig it.
yeah. Well, and there's a patience in the filmmaking that comes through, and a patience in the storytelling that I don't think we see a whole lot, and this film really just masterfully executes it. But I'm curious, like, is this one that you guys think you might share with other people? Because I'm very excited to have shared it with you, and I'm even more excited that you both really enjoyed
I
it.
would definitely.
So I'm just curious.
Sorry, I would. Yeah, I would definitely share it with people. And like I said, I would actually purchase it, had it, if it's available, if I can, track one down.
Yeah, I will recommend it to my friends for sure. I really enjoyed this movie, so thank you so much, Pete, for the discovery, really.
So it doesn't have an expiration date. You'll still be thinking about
In
it in
5 years, I will
5
remember.
years, you'll be in the back of the 5 years, you'll still be in the back of the car with Bob Hoskins.
Yeah, and cheers, Brosnan. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm just going to point out that 7 to 8 years later, he's acting against a animated rabbit.
That's range.
What range? What range? You know what I mean? And technically, the rabbit wasn't even there. So it's like, but to play, because he has his moments where he's kind of scared. As a kid, you're watching that, he starts like hammering the desk. That's my brother's chair, and it's like, oh, this guy's no nonsense. We don't mess with Eddie Valiant. Yeah, I mean that's some range though. Him doing the song and dance in the factory at the end, and it's like, so it's like him being totally silly and not taking himself too seriously and diving into that. I mean, that's just awesome.
There is something I wanted to say to Steve. You said that your favorite scene is the one in the elevator, but you understood that it's really, really sexual, this scene?
Yes.
That's why I was laughing, because for me it's so sexual that, yeah, I mean, I was quite embarrassed in a way watching it, because
I
the
love
thing
stuff
with
like
the
that.
button means a lot, actually.
Steve has 4 kids.
So you know how to
kids.
you know how to press the button.
Sexual
then.
being.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the ladies, but I got to tell you, that's one of the things I loved about it, because I've seen scenes like that in other films where they attempt to do that, and it's like nosedive, no good. It's that scene for me works because of what she did in the scene.
Yeah, sure.
She had a vulnerability. She had like an innocence. She had like her eyes are saying, "Take me." You know what I'm saying? But like she realizes it can't happen, and that I think that's and because in not saying that the guy who played Jeff is doing a bad job in that scene. He's not by any sense, by any means at all. But it's because of what she's doing with that performance, and all in the eye, and she's captivating in that scene. And then as an audience member, you understand why Jeff says the things and does the things that he does. I get it, man. When I believe it, I'm right on board with you. So I totally got what he was feeling. Because sometimes I said, like, when
I'm
you
not
have the
sure
wrong
everybody
actress,
would understand. Yeah, I'm not sure everybody would understand the button thing, what happens with the button. I think some people will just understand. They try to go upstairs. Well, actually, there is something, there is a meaning behind it. So.
No, absolutely. Like, again, believability. If you're going to get whacked out over a woman, that's the one to go after. I'm telling you.
On that note, I think that will about do it for us here today at the Visually Hidden Selects podcast. We will have a completely different conversation next time regarding a completely different film. So be sure to head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss that selection. You can catch Stephen Bendler over at Steve's Pop Culture Corner on Instagram. Ann and I are also on Instagram as well as Letterboxd, so you can follow us over there and see what we think about the films we watch. And until next time, have a good Friday.
I thought you were going to say keep your finger on the button, but that, something.